I'm going to tell you about something that happened to me 3 years ago. Something I still can't explain. Something that made me sell every piece of hunting equipment I owned and swear I'd never look through a rifle scope again. My name's Marcus Chen. I'm 34 years old, work as a structural engineer in Portland, and up until November 2022, I considered myself a rational person. The kind of guy who trusted data, measurements, specifications. If I couldn't quantify it, it didn't exist. Hunting was my escape from that world of blueprints and stress calculation. Every fall, I'd take 2 weeks off and head into the wilderness. No spreadsheets, no project deadlines, just me, the mountains, and whatever elk or deer I could track down. That year, I'd been working on a particularly brutal project. A 12-story commercial building with foundation issues that weren't caught until we were already 8 floors up. The pressure was crushing. My boss was threatening lawsuits. I wasn't sleeping. My hands would shake during morning meetings from the anxiety medication I'd started taking. I needed that hunting trip more than I'd ever needed anything. I chose the Cascade Range in Central Oregon, specifically a remote area about 40 miles west of Bend, accessible only by logging roads that hadn't been maintained in years. The region was known for Roosevelt elk, black-tailed deer, and according to the forums I'd read, almost zero human traffic outside of summer hiking season. Perfect. I'd hunted solo before, but never this deep into genuine backcountry. I packed accordingly. A Tikka T3X in 308, a backup Glock 20 for bear country, 3 days of freeze-dried meals, a quality tent, sleeping bag rated to 10 below, water filtration system, first aid kit, GPS unit, and a satellite phone for emergencies. That last item was important. My ex-girlfriend, Sarah, had made me promise to carry it after a buddy of mine got turned around in the Wallowers and spent 4 days eating pine nuts before a search party found him. I'd grumbled about the expense, but I bought the thing, clipped it right to my pack. The drive took 6 hours from Portland. By the time I reached the trailhead, if you could even call it that, it was nearly 4 in the afternoon. Late October sun was already dropping behind the ridgeline, painting everything in that golden autumn light that makes photographers weep. I stood there at the truck for a moment, just breathing. Clean air, pine resin, that particular smell of decomposing leaves and earth that only exists in undisturbed forest. My chest felt lighter already. The plan was simple. Hike 3 miles to a meadow I'd identified on topographic maps. Set up camp. Spend the next day and a half glassing for elk. If I got lucky, I'd have meat in the cooler and be back at the truck by Thursday evening. I locked the Chevy, shouldered my pack, and started walking. The trail was barely visible, overgrown. Every few hundred yards, I'd have to stop and check my GPS to make sure I hadn't wandered off course. The forest here was old growth. Douglas fir trees wider than my arm span, their bark deeply furrowed and dark. Western red cedar, hemlock. The canopy was so thick that even though sunset was still an hour away, the light had that filtered greenish quality you only get deep in old forests. It was beautiful, exactly what I needed. About a mile in, I noticed my phone had lost signal. Not surprising. I'd expected that. What I didn't expect was the way it happened. Usually you get a gradual drop. 4 bars, 3, 2, 1, searching. But mine went from 3 bars to nothing in the space of about 10 steps. I actually stopped and looked at it. The screen showed 0 bars, and then, as I watched, the battery percentage started dropping. 93%, 92, 91, like something was draining it. Weird, but not alarming. Phones do strange things in cold weather and dense forest. I turned it off completely to preserve battery and kept walking. The forest was quiet. That's the first thing I really remember noticing. Not the peaceful quiet of a sleeping woods, but an active, listening kind of silence. No bird calls, no squirrel chatter, just my boots on the pine needles and my own breathing. I told myself it was because I was making noise. That's what hunters do wrong. We stomp through the forest like we own it and wonder why we never see anything. I made a conscious effort to walk more quietly. It didn't change the silence, I am now. By the time I reached the meadow, the sun had dropped below the mountains and twilight was settling in fast. The meadow was larger than I'd expected from the map, maybe 200 yards across, roughly oval, ringed by dense forest. In the centre was a small creek, barely more than a trickle, and good flat ground for a tent. I set up camp quickly. I'd done it enough times that my hands moved through the routine automatically. Tent up, sleeping bag unrolled, bare hang for the food, small fire pit, ringed with rocks from the creek. By the time I had a fire going, full darkness had arrived. I sat there eating beef stroganoff from a foil pouch, watching the flames dance. feeling that knot in my chest finally start to unwind. This was exactly what I needed. Solitude, simplicity, the kind of quiet that lets your brain finally stop running in circles. The fire popped and crackled. Somewhere far off, I thought I heard an owl. Maybe. I stayed up longer than I should have, feeding the fire, not wanting to climb into the tent just yet. The stars were incredible. No light pollution this far out. The Milky Way stretched overhead like someone had spilled milk across black canvas. Around 10, I finally doused the fire and crawled into my sleeping bag. I'm not sure what woke me. One moment I was deep asleep. The next I was wide awake with my heart hammering. The kind of instant, primal wakefulness that bypasses your conscious brain entirely. I lay there in the darkness of the tent, listening. Nothing, but something had woken me. I checked my watch, 1:43 a.m. The temperature had dropped significantly. I could see my breath in the faint moonlight filtering through the tent fabric. I lay there for maybe 5 minutes, just listening, trying to figure out what had pulled me from sleep. Then I heard it. A snapping sound, like someone stepping on a branch, maybe 60 or 70 yards away at the tree line. Elk, I told myself. Deer. Black bear maybe, though they should be thinking about denning up this time of year. Another snap. Closer. I sat up slowly, reaching for the flashlight I kept by my pillow. My fingers found the Glock instead. I hadn't even realised I'd left it in the tent, but I was suddenly very glad I had. More movement. Definitely something large working its way through the brush. Probably an elk. Roosevelt bulls can weigh 700 pounds. They make noise. But something about the rhythm was wrong. The steps were too deliberate, too measured. Like something testing each footfall before committing its weight. I unzipped the tent as quietly as I could and peered out. The meadow was bathed in moonlight. 3/4 moon, bright enough to cast shadows. The creek glittered. The grass looked silver. Nothing moved. I scanned the tree line slowly, looking for the telltale gleam of animal eyes reflecting light. Nothing. The forest was absolutely silent. I stayed there, half in and half out of the tent, for at least 10 minutes. My knees started to ache. The cold bit at my face. Finally, I crawled back inside, zipped up, and lay down with the Glock in my hand. It took a long time to fall back asleep. Morning came grey and cold. Heavy clouds had moved in overnight, and the air had that damp, dense quality that promises rain. I made coffee on my camp stove, instant stuff that tasted like battery acid, and studied the meadow in daylight. Everything looked normal, peaceful. The creek bubbled along. A Clark's nutcracker called from somewhere in the trees. I couldn't shake the feeling from the night before, though. That sense of being watched. Get it together, Marcus. You're alone in the woods. Your nervous system is still fried from 3 months of 18-hour workdays. You're jumping at shadows. I packed my day gear, rifle, extra ammunition, water, energy bars, rangefinder, binoculars, and my vortex scope. A beautiful piece of glass that had cost me $800 and could resolve a deer's ear at 600 yards. The plan was to work my way to a ridge about a mile north of camp. Good vantage point overlooking several clearings. Prime elk habitat. I started walking at first light. The forest felt different in daylight, still quiet but less oppressive. I moved slowly, stopping frequently to glass the terrain ahead. This far into the season, elk were pressured and skittish. You had to be patient. The ridge took 90 minutes to reach. The last 100 yards were steep enough that I was breathing hard, my legs burning, but the view was worth it. From up here, I could see 3 separate meadows below me, connected by fingers of forest. Perfect terrain. Elk would bed in the timber and move into the clearings to feed in early morning or evening. I found a comfortable spot behind a fallen log, set up a shooting rest, and settled in to wait and watch. This is what hunting really is, you know. 99% waiting and watching. 1% of explosive action when it all comes together. I glassed the meadows methodically, left to right, top to bottom, taking my time, looking for that one thing that doesn't quite fit. An ear flick, a horizontal line in a world of vertical trees, the flash of a tawny hide. Nothing. An hour passed. 2. Around 10 a.m, light rain started. Not heavy, just a constant drizzle that found its way down my collar and made everything cold and miserable. I was debating heading back to camp to wait out the weather when I saw the movement in the middle clearing. I brought the binoculars up. 3 cows. No bull, but where there are cows, bulls aren't far behind during rut season. I watched them for 20 minutes as they fed, moving slowly across the meadow. Beautiful animals, muscular, their coats dark with rain. Then at the far tree line, I saw the bull. He stepped out of the shadows like a king surveying his domain, 6 points on each side, heavy, thick antlers, probably 750 pounds. My heart rate kicked up immediately. This was a good bull, a mature animal. Exactly what I'd come here for. I brought the rifle up slowly, getting comfortable behind the scope. The bull was maybe 350 yards out. An ethical shot if I did my part. I found him in the scope, adjusted magnification. 16 power gave me a crystal clear view. I could see individual droplets of rain on his coat. He was quartering toward me slightly. Not a perfect broadside shot, but workable. I'd wait for him to turn, present a better angle. He took another step into the clearing. I clicked off the safety, and that's when I saw it. Behind the bull, maybe 20 yards back in the tree line. There was something else. At first, I thought it was another elk, a second bull maybe, but the shape was wrong, too tall, too narrow. I shifted the scope slightly, trying to get a clear view. Whatever it was standing absolutely still, just inside the shadow line where the forest began. I couldn't make out details, just a dark, vertical shape that didn't quite resolve into anything recognizable. Probably a tree stump, or shadows playing tricks. The human brain is wired to find patterns, to see faces and figures in random shapes. I shifted the scope back to the bull. He'd moved further into the clearing, almost broadside now. This was my shot. I took a breath, let half of it out, found the spot right behind his front shoulder, put the crosshairs there. My finger touched the trigger, and I glanced back, just for a second, at that shape in the trees. It had moved. I know how that sounds. I know what you're thinking. Optical illusion, parallax error. The scope shifted. But I've been looking through scopes for 15 years. I know what I saw. The shape was closer to the bull, maybe 10 yards back now instead of 20. And it wasn't a stump. I could see the outline more clearly now. Tall, at least 7 feet, maybe more. The proportions were all wrong for a human. Arms too long, shoulders too broad, head too small or misshapen. I couldn't quite tell. It was just standing there, watching the bull. A shiver ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the rain. I shifted the scope fully onto the shape, trying to see what the hell I was looking at. The moment the crosshairs centered on it, it turned its head, looked directly at me. I couldn't see features. Not really. The shadows were too deep, the distance too great. But I felt its gaze lock onto me, with the physical weight of a punch to the chest. My finger came off the trigger. The bull, forgotten now, spooked at something and bounded back into the trees, the cows following. In 3 seconds, the meadow was empty. I kept the scope on that shape. It didn't move, just kept watching me. My rational mind was fighting hard to explain what I was seeing. A person, just another hunter, someone else who'd hiked in, was working the same area. But the size was wrong, the proportions were wrong. And no hunter would stand that close to a shootable bull without moving, without trying to get their own shot. I lowered the rifle slowly. With my naked eyes, I could barely make out that spot in the trees. Just darkness and timber. The scope had magnified it 16 times, but even then, I couldn't quite process what I was seeing. I raised the rifle again, looked through the scope. Ugh, it was gone. The spot where it had been standing was empty, just trees and shadows. I scanned left and right, looking for movement. Nothing. Whatever I'd seen, if I'd actually seen anything, had vanished in the 5 seconds I'd looked away. I stayed on that ridge for another hour, watching, waiting for the bull to come back, or for that shape to reappear. Neither happened. The rain picked up. By noon, I was soaked and shivering. I made the decision to head back to camp. Warm up, dry out. I could come back up in the evening if the weather cleared. The hike back down seemed to take longer than the climb up. I kept stopping, looking over my shoulder, checking the forest behind me. That feeling of being watched had returned, stronger now. When I reached camp around 1 p.m, I got a fire going immediately. Stripped off my wet outer layers and hung them near the flames to dry. Made hot coffee and soup. Tried to warm up. I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen. The more I replayed it in my mind, the more I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Shadows, imagination, stress from work, manifesting in weird ways. But I knew what I'd seen. Something had been watching that bull, and then it had watched me. I spent the afternoon in camp. The rain continued, turning the meadow into a soggy mess. Any thoughts of an evening hunt evaporated. I wasn't going back out in this. By 6 p.m, with darkness falling early under the heavy clouds, I retreated to my tent. I lay there in my sleeping bag, listening to rain drum against the nylon, trying to read a paperback I'd brought by headlamp, failing to focus on the words. Sleep came eventually, fitful and full of half-remembered dreams. I woke to silence. The rain had stopped. I checked my watch. 2:17 OM, almost the exact same time as the night before. I lay there, every nerve on high alert, waiting for whatever had woken me to reveal itself. For maybe 5 minutes nothing happened. Then, from right outside my tent, I heard breathing. Not heavy, not laboured, just the soft, steady rhythm of something alive, something standing maybe 3 feet from the thin nylon wall. Every muscle in my body locked up. The Glock was in my right hand. I didn't remember reaching for it. The breathing continued. Deep, slow, like whatever was out there was tasting the air. Then, movement. Footsteps circling the tent. Not stumbling or clumsy. Deliberate. Testing. I wanted to call out. To yell. To make noise and scare it away. But my throat was closed. No sound would come. The footsteps completed full circle and stopped at the tent entrance. I watched the zipper, waiting for it to move, waiting for whatever was out there to try to come in, but it didn't. Instead, there was a sound, low, almost subsonic. I felt it in my chest more than heard it, a vibration that made my teeth ache. Then the footsteps moved away, back towards the tree line, fading into the distance. I stayed frozen for at least 30 minutes after the sound stopped. My hand cramped around the Glock's grip. Cold sweat soaked my thermal shirt. When I finally moved, it was to check my satellite phone. Dead. Not just out of signal, completely dead. The screen wouldn't even turn on. My GPS unit, also dead. My regular cell phone, dead. My headlamp, I clicked it on. Nothing. Changed the batteries from my spare set. Nothing. The new batteries were dead too. In the span of 2 days, every electronic device I'd brought had been drained completely. The only light I had was the chemical glow sticks I kept in my first aid kit. I cracked one open. The green glow pushed back the darkness, but made everything look alien and wrong. I sat there in that eerie light, holding the Glock until dawn. When grey morning light finally filtered through the tent, I made my decision. I was leaving. I packed in a frenzy, shoved everything into my pack without organisation or care, dropped the tent in a messy pile, didn't even bother with the bear hang, just crammed the food into my pack and started walking. Griaya, I needed to get back to the truck, get out of here. I could process what had happened when I was somewhere with other people, with cell signal, with locked doors and walls. The 3-mile hike back felt like 30. I kept stopping, spinning around, checking behind me. That feeling of being watched was so intense now, it was almost physical, like pressure between my shoulder blades. An hour into the hike, I heard something in the forest paralleling my path. Branches breaking, heavy footfalls, keeping pace with me about 50 yards off to my right. I picked up speed. So did whatever was following me. I broke into a jog. My pack bounced awkwardly. I didn't care. The sounds matched my pace exactly. When I slowed down, it slowed down. When I stopped, it stopped. I pulled the Glock out, held it in my right hand as I moved. The rifle was slung across my chest, but the handgun felt more reassuring. Something I could bring to bear quickly if I needed to. Another mile, the sounds continued, never closer than 50 yards, never farther than 75. Herding me, some part of my brain whispered, "It's herding you like prey." I refused to accept that, kept moving. Finally, blessedly, I saw the clearing where I'd parked the truck. I ran the last 100 yards, burst out of the tree line into blessed open space. The truck was exactly where I'd left it. I fumbled for my keys, dropped them in the dirt, picked them up, jammed them into the door lock. Before I opened the door, I turned around. At the edge of the forest, maybe 40 yards away, standing in full daylight, was the shape from my scope. I could see it clearly now. It stood at least 7.5 feet tall. The body was humanoid but wrong. Arms that hung below where the knees should be, shoulders unnaturally broad. The head was large but oddly shaped, elongated. The skin, if you could call it that, looked dark and leathery, almost bark-like in texture, and the eyes, even from 40 yards I could see the eyes. They caught the morning light and reflected it back with a dull amber glow. We stared at each other for maybe 10 seconds. It didn't move, didn't make a sound, just watched me with an intelligence that was absolutely undeniable. This wasn't an animal, this was something that thought, something that understood exactly what it was doing. I yanked the truck door open, threw my pack in the back seat, climbed in and locked the doors with shaking hands. When I looked up again, it was gone, just empty tree line. I started the engine, threw the truck into drive, and got the hell out of there. I drove straight through to Portland, didn't stop except for gas. 6 hours with my hands locked on the wheel, checking the rearview mirror constantly. When I got home, I sat in my apartment for 3 days. Didn't go to work, didn't return calls, just sat there trying to make sense of what had happened. Eventually, I filed a report with the Forest Service, said I'd encountered something unusual, large, unidentified animal. They were polite, but clearly didn't take it seriously. Black bear, probably, the ranger told me. They can look pretty imposing when they stand up. I didn't argue. A week later I went back, not to the same trailhead, but close. I needed to know I wasn't losing my mind. I parked at a different access point, hiked a short loop trail, popular spot, well maintained. About 2 miles in, I found a tree with marks on it, long, deep gouges in the bark, too high for a bear, too wide. And next to the tree, in soft mud, a print. It looked almost human. 5 toes, heel, arch, but it was at least 18 inches long and proportioned wrong. The toes were too splayed, the arch too flat. I took photos with my phone. When I got home and looked at them, they were corrupted. Just digital noise and artifacts, every single one. I sold my hunting gear 2 months later. All of it. The rifle I'd saved for 2 years to buy. The scope, the packs, everything. I told people I was too busy with work, that I'd lost interest. That's not true. The truth is, I can't go back into those woods, any woods really, because I know what's out there now. I know that we share this world with something else, something that stays hidden most of the time, but is always there, watching, just beyond the edge of our perception. And I know that my scope showed me something that wasn't supposed to be seen. Here's the thing that keeps me up at night though. I've spent 3 years trying to rationalize what happened. Sleep deprivation, stress, hallucination, psychological break from work pressure. But 6 months ago, I was scrolling through a forum, one of those paranormal sites that's 90% nonsense. Someone had posted a story about hunting in Central Oregon, Cascade Range. They described seeing something through their scope, something tall and wrong, something that watched them. Their electronics had died too. All of them. Same timeline, same 24-hour period. They posted pictures of marks on a tree, gouges, deep ones, and a print in the mud. I looked at those photos for 2 hours. They were taken 60 miles from where I'd been. Different drainage, different mountain range entirely. But the marks were identical. I created a throwaway account, sent them a private message, asked if they'd reported it. They responded 2 days later. I tried. Forest Service wasn't interested. But here's the thing. I went back 3 weeks later, just to see. The tree was gone, cut down, and the trail had been rerouted. Like someone didn't want people going back to that spot. We traded a few more messages, compared notes. The details were eerily similar. The circling behaviour, the breathing, the sense of being herded. Their final message to me was short. I don't hunt anymore, can't. But I keep thinking about something. If we both saw it, how many other people have? And what does it mean that it's letting us see it? What's it waiting for? I never responded. I didn't have an answer. I still don't. But I'll tell you this. Every year, hundreds of people go missing in national forests and wilderness areas. Some are found, most aren't. The ones that are found are often miles from where they disappeared, with no memory of how they got there. Or they're found dead, from exposure or falls or animal attacks. The official explanations usually make sense. Usually. But I wonder now. I can't help it. How many of those people saw something through a scope, or a camera lens, or just with their own eyes that they weren't supposed to see? How many of them felt that pressure between their shoulders, heard those footsteps circling in the night? I work from home now. My apartment is on the 4th floor. Windows face the street. I sold my truck and bought a sedan. Something that would never take me deep into the woods. And I've never owned another scope, because I know, with absolute certainty, that if I looked through magnified glass again, if I really studied the shadows and the distant tree lines, I'd see them. They're always there, just beyond what we're supposed to notice, watching, waiting. And every time I close my eyes, I'm back on that ridge, 350 yards from a bull elk I'll never shoot, looking through a scope that cost $800 and shows things in crystal clarity, seeing that shape turn its head, feeling its eyes lock onto mine, knowing with primal certainty that I wasn't looking at it. It was allowing itself to be seen. My hands are shaking as I finish this. They do that now, sometimes. Started after that trip. Doctors say it's essential tremor, stress-related. Maybe, yeah. Or maybe it's because some part of my nervous system understands that I touched something I wasn't meant to touch, saw something that exists in the margins of human awareness. I used to think I was a rational person. I'm not sure what I think anymore, but I know this. If you hunt, if you spend time in deep wilderness, get yourself a good scope, the best you can afford. And whatever you do, don't look too carefully at the shadows, because sooner or later, you'll see what I saw. And once you do, you'll never stop looking over your shoulder. Never stop checking the tree line. Never stop wondering what else is out there, just beyond the edge of perception, watching us with ancient eyes that see so much more than we do. My scope showed me something that wasn't there. Except it was. It always has been. We just stopped looking.